Are you looking for an evergreen shrub that wouldn't be so large, maybe about 12 feet or so, and have berries that the birds would love so you could add something to the biodiversity of your yard? I am always looking around wherever I go to see if there's some kind of shrub or perennial flower that might have a great spot in my yard. But one thing I've learned is you can't just what you see without doing some research. In this video, I'm gonna share with you the background of this plant that is behind me. It looks like it would check all the boxes. Evergreen, 12 to 13 feet tall, interesting berries. Maybe the birds would just go crazy. The importance of looking it up and making sure that I don't make what I would consider a fatal gardening mistake by bringing this shrub into my yard. This plant is known as Privet. You may have heard of it called Chinese Privet. The botanical name is Ligustrum Sinense. The growth of this tree could be 6 feet up to 13, depending on the conditions. In the springtime, they were very fragrant flowers, now developed into these dark purple, almost black berries, hanging in large clumps off of these shrubs. Here's a huge cluster of them just on one shrub. Berries have fallen and they've formed this large, dense shrub area. And this is mini plants. You can see some of the smaller ones down here. And they will continue to fill in this area unless somebody comes and cuts them all down. We may think, oh, this looks like it's fairly fast growing and certainly adapted to this area, hardy. Why don't I consider getting one of these plants for my yard? Well, if you live in North Florida, this is just across the border in Georgia, so I can't speak for Georgia. But for North Florida and actually all of Florida, this is a Category 1 invasive plant. The range of this plant goes from South Florida all the way up to North Florida, and we can see that it's doing just fine here in southern Georgia. Wanted to share with you what a Category 1 invasive species is. It's considered non-native, exotic, and it's altering plant communities by displacing native species, changing community structures or ecological functions, or hybridizing with natives. There's also a Category 2, and it hasn't yet altered plant communities to the extent as Category 1. We now have in Florida at least 1.5 million acres of land overrun with invasive plants. So we're spending over $100 million a year to try to manage these invasive plants that are taking over in our ecosystem. Invasive plants spread, they get into waterways, they escape from containers and planting areas, they get into our wild areas, they start to outcompete our native plants, and some of them even become a pestilence and can produce mats, smother out plants, and then be a fire hazard. In addition to being a Category 1 invasive, it's considered a noxious weed, and that means that sale of this plant is prohibited. The reason I point that out is because many times people will be tempted to stop on the roadside because they'll see someone who has plants that they've potted up from their yard. They have them for sale and they seem very cheap, and they think, oh, they're growing in their yard. Maybe I can just add these to my yard. Don't do that. You could be getting a Chinese privet or privet and taking it to your yard, and all of a sudden you have a Godzilla type plant that then you're going to have to spend a lot of time and money to get rid of. I'd like to share with you some information about invasive plants so that you know how to choose carefully. A lot of people just don't realize that Florida has a lot of invasive plants. So rather than getting, oh my goodness, I didn't know, and in a situation where then you have to dig out something because it's taking over your garden bed or it's getting underneath the foundation of sheds or its berries are dropping all over the yard and young plants are sprouting up. Our climate here, plenty of sunshine, we have a rainy season, and many plants thrive in this environment. So it's up to us as gardeners to take a minute when we see something, do our research, and find out if it's on the invasive list or a noxious weed before we ever bring something in to our yards. Always better to be cautious, to be safe than to be sorry, spending money, time, effort to dig out something that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So you might wonder, well, how are invasive plants introduced to our area in the first place? A lot of them come in through the ornamental plant industry, and that's a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide. They're brought in from all over. Consumers may say, oh, look at this plant. It's so interesting. Let me add it to my yard. I've never seen one like it before. Also, these invasive species are often spread through seed swaps. Pass along plants. Neighbors can pass along something to a neighbor. Say, hey, I saw you were working on your yard. I have this plant that I've had for a long time, and I've dug some up and potted them up, and I'd like to share it with you. And you think, oh, how nice. However, it could be a plant that you're sorry you ever accepted. There are also things called plant swaps. And again, unless the plant is identified and you know the botanical name of this plant and you're sure you're getting the right plant, when you go to plant swaps and things like that, you may be bringing home an invasive plant. Usually, plants that are sold in retail have the plant name and a plant card, and it identifies both the common name and the botanical or scientific name. Double check and make sure that the plant that you're getting is not going to be a problem. You can look it up on the University of Florida. This would apply to other states and other zones. You type in the name of your land-grant university. So in Florida, University of Florida, and I just type in UF. I hit a space bar, and then I type in the name of the plant, the common name. Then I get a whole bunch of information from the University of Florida IFAS Center that does the research on plants, and it will share scientific pages, it'll share common gardening pages and information. The other thing to do on your search, I happen to have Google, so there's a little icon camera on the search bar line. I'll take a picture and I'll load that picture into that icon, and it'll ask me, what do you want? Do you want the name of this plant? Do you want to know about this plant? So I will select that, and it gives a whole list of sources where I can go to verify what this plant is. So one thing I learned when I was doing some research on this plant is that these berries are toxic. And that answered my question, why is this plant just loaded with berries? I'm hearing bird call all around and seeing birds flying in this area, but no birds are coming to eat these berries. While may eat these berries and spread the seeds, the fruit does contain toxins that can cause GI, gut distress, weakness, or in some cases death. This is considered a low nutrient density food for birds. Well, a plant with toxic berries, that's no benefit to our ecosystem. That's something we don't want or need. Here's an example of some helpful plant information that you can get, and this came from the University of Florida. And you'll notice plant instead, this picture of a star, the Florida anise, and that's what the flowers look like. You can see Florida privet, waxleaf privet, Florida anise, eastern redbuds are great alternatives to this privet. And then here are the two approved cultivars. To get the latest information, always check on the website of the University of Florida. In the references below, I will link information. You're armed with how to make sure that the plants that you buy are just the right things for your environment, and how to get reputable science-based information on what to do and what are good replacement or alternative plant selections that will be gorgeous in your yard so you can create the garden you love. For more plant information and inspiration, subscribe. Garden Yay! See you again soon.